Out this morning are higher than expectation, signaling an increasingly tough job market. For more on that and other news coming out of our nation's capital, Republican Congressman Bilbray of California joins me right now. Congressman, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Alexis.
All right, first your reaction. These continuing claims numbers hitting new highs once again definitely means we've got some issues in the job market. What's your reaction?
Okay, very bleak, and got to remember that this is not only a major hit there, but you got to consider that the federal government just hired 72,000 employees, so you've got to, that's an artificial bump down, so you actually have to add those in if you really want to look at private sector foundation, and so it's a real crisis, especially for those of us who are looking at the budget, because remember, the new administration has projected in their budget an 8% unemployment rate. Well, that doesn't wash anymore, and that has to revise all of our projections of what is really practical when we talk about revenues in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, look, Congressman, your state has been hit exceptionally hard, as has been the Rust Belt area. Some projecting 10% at a minimum. What do we do now, though, to create those new jobs? Because this administration initially was saying they could create or save 3.5 million jobs. I don't see where the job growth is coming from, and I don't know if this fiscal stimulus at 1.5 million jobs, they say, by the end of the year is going to do it.
Alexis, the problem is that we've got to recognize there's an institutional problem with the fact that Washington has not addressed a major concern, and that is you can't operate a modern economy with energy costing more than labor. And we haven't had an energy policy, a real energy policy, for over 30 years. And while we're all talking about the challenges of the economy and climate, but we're not willing to be brave enough to talk about stuff like what is the federal government doing about doubling nuclear power within the next decade, which is very cost effective, very clean, and those who are really looking at it are saying we just got to look at finding reasons to get things done rather than always blocking things like the development of new technologies that the government is standing in the way of. And I think that's one of the ugly little secrets out there, is that I don't care if it's fuel-efficient cars, if it's developing new fuel mixes, the government is really a major barrier on that, and we've got to understand that we all talk about a Manhattan Project for the economy or for energy, when in fact the Manhattan Project wouldn't be legal under federal law right now. We've got to go sort of change the way Washington thinks about our relationship with the private sector if we really want to see ourselves get out of this, rather than always pointing fingers that the private sector isn't doing enough.
Let's speak specifically about private sector jobs, because one of the issues that have frustrated me most about this current recovery package coming out of the administration is that very little of it speaks directly to the small business owners who create 70% of the jobs in this country. And you've got 27 million small business owners who would like to be able to keep people on their payroll, but when you see 611,000 private sector jobs lost last Friday, it's an indication of how tightly they're being squeezed. Are we doing enough to address the people who are creating the jobs?
No, in fact, just the opposite. You're hearing the rhetoric that, first of all, you have independent business people that are taxed twice on Social Security. They're punished for not being part of big labor or big business. We just sort of double whammy them because they don't have lobbyists in Washington to have things custom fitted for them. But we also got to recognize that this is the energy or the economic stimulus going to come from the small business. But when you hear the administration or anybody else talk about let's sock it to the rich guy and let's tax those that are at 500,000, they fail to tell you that the overwhelming majority of those that are going to be hit are going to be small business. And then they'll go, oops, we didn't mean to do that. Because you don't have the small business represented before the Ways and Means Committee when these things come down. It's the little business guy who gets shafted on this. And I just wish those that were so upset at big business would understand that the real enemy of big business is not big government. That's an ally of big business. The real enemy of big business is little business that's allowed to compete and bring big business under rein and keep it within proper parameters. But the federal government and government overall tends to punish people for being little and entrepreneurial while they subsidize the big guy. Remember the big line, too big to fail. How many times have you heard that in the last couple of months?
Yeah, you mentioned labor at the very beginning. There's a specific labor issue going on in your state. The SEIU basically lobbied to the administration about these health care cuts that were being worked on with Governor Schwarzenegger and health care workers in the state who were going to take some cuts because the state is facing a real fiscal budget deficit. it could result in the administration not giving $6.8 billion of the fiscal stimulus package to you guys. What's the backstory here, and why the tit for tat?
I'll tell you, this is outrageous. And as a former mayor and chairman of San Diego County, to have the administration basically try to extort a renegotiation of a contract with a labor union just because we're trying to balance the budget back in California, something I wish that Washington was more serious about. But this was really an issue of probably, follow the money. Was it $30 million that this union gave to the administration? And I think there are people in Washington who think that they owe the union everything and don't owe the people of California anything. And I think that this is one of those frustrations you have, that this so-called stimulus package is not necessarily about helping as much as control. And I think this is a good example. If the administration really wants to help the state of California, it will help and not obstruct the balancing of the budget.
I mean, look, there's two things I want to point out. Number one, the president on Monday said no decision had been made on whether or not they were going to rescind the funds. Then you also had the spokesperson for the U.S. of Health and Human Services, because I understand Kathleen Sebelius, the Health and Human Services Secretary, was notified about this, who also said no final determination. But what is this? What is the root of this? Is this about union labor contracts, or is this about getting out of the fiscal straits that we're in, dire straits in many cases, particularly in the state of California? I mean, I don't understand this.
Alexis, you remember the words, let no crisis go unexploited. I think what you're starting to see is that the financial crisis that California is in many states now is being looked at as an opportunity to pay back for political contributions and support that happened the last election. And this is the kind of cynical politics that people wanted to see a change. This is not what the American people voted for. They wanted to see these kind of tactics left in the past and moving forward to a fresh, new approach that wherever, and that Washington doesn't try to coerce and extort policies out of the local community. The Governor Schwarzenegger was elected to represent the people of California just as much as Obama was elected to be president of the United States. And for the executive branch in Washington to try to dictate to the people of California when and how we can balance our budget, I think is not only fair, I think it totally violates the entire concept of separation of powers under our Constitution. They got to go back and read that section and understand that they shouldn't be doing this. And I think it's going to hurt the credibility of the new administration to start off with this kind of Chicago hardball politics.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, reading about it this morning, I was incredibly shocked about it, and I hope it's not the case in other states. But, when they said fair and open disclosure about contracts, particularly as it related to, R&D or specifically infrastructure here, they said it was going to be an open bidding process. You start to wonder when you hear things like this. All right, well, Congressman Brian Bilbray, wonderful having you on. I know we could continue the conversation, but I'm going to get the hook.
Thank you, Alexis. But appreciate it. And if they do this to the governor, imagine what they'll do if they can get away with this with the governor, or what they do with other governors.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Thanks so much. Coming up.